Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's the scariest dream you've ever had? I mean, one so disturbing it stays with you. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Standing in my living room, looking out the window, and I see a nuclear bomb go off near the horizon. I lived with two of my sisters, so I started to run around the house, telling them what had happened. After a minute or so, we felt the blast wave go through us, and we thought the worst was over. Then another bomb went off, this time a little closer. The blast wave hit us sooner, and I remember my skin feeling like I had horrible sunburn. I thought to myself, this is probably what it feels like to be in a microwave. We lived on a cul-de-sac, and our neighbor and two of his sons were standing in the road. We walked up to them as another nuclear bomb went off within a few miles of us, and I looked at the neighbor and said, "When are they going to stop?" He hauntingly responded, "When we're all dead." Then the blast wave hit us, and the dream was over. That dream still bothers me, and I dreamt it over a year ago. So vivid, and the pain I felt was unique. Very creepy. I'm not sure if this counts, but I used to get really bad sleep paralysis. I have an old wooden rocking chair in my room. One night my eyes fluttered open, and I was laying on my back with my head turned towards the chair. On that chair, there was a woman crying, her eyes out, staring directly at me as she pulled out her insides. Her skin was a pale gray color, and she had blonde hair. She just stared at me. I was scared shitless. I tried closing my eyes, and then I felt a pressure on my chest, common in sleep paralysis. You guessed it. She was sitting on my chest, pulling out her innards all over my chest while crying. Actually wet the bed. I was 20. This was more than 10 years ago, but I still remember it. Basically, I'm sitting on an empty bus aside from the driver, holding a potato sack which contains my sister's bones. The bus just drives around while I sit there, crying. When I was around 14 years old, I started having these short, reoccurring dreams of me in front of a temple, sitting cross-legged with a little girl in my lap. Everything was in black and white, and she was a small white girl wearing a white dress and had long black hair. She looked so innocent. Somehow, in the dream, I knew she was slowly dying in my arms. The reason why this creeps me out a little is because I kept on having this dream. Only every time I would have it again, she would creep closer and closer to death. The worst part is that I had this agonizing feeling that there was something I could do about it, but I had no idea how to stop it. Eventually, I had the dream where she finally died in my arms, and then the dreams stopped. I still feel like I failed her. A sequential dream can be disturbing, but at least you had some type of closure with it, so sorry that you had it, but at least you had an ending. I had a dream where my 3-year-old daughter and I were standing on a dock on a lake when she slipped off and fell in the lake. She sank like a stone. I immediately dove in after her, swimming straight down to try to catch up with her. I remember her looking up at me, reaching up to me, opening her mouth and trying to scream. I remember seeing the bubbles from her mouth drift up toward me. I was swimming downward as fast as I could while trying to grab her arms, her pigtails, anything. I remember reaching the point where I knew that even if I reached her, I would not be able to make it to the surface. I was resolved to not let her die alone. I keep swimming down. For all of my efforts, she was sinking away from me faster than I could swim toward her. I watched her slip further and further away, the image of her growing blurrier and blurrier in the murky water. And I wake up. I immediately ran to my daughter's room and pick her up and hug her. At the time, I was in the process of separating from my then wife, so to me, there's no great mystery surrounding the meaning of this dream. Probably of the recurring dreams I have that my teeth slowly fall out. Even if I run my tongue through them, they fall out, or I pull them out. I wake up scared shitless that I have no teeth. I had a recurring dream when I was a child. I would wander through my grandparents' house and no one would be there. There were no cars on the street, no one. But in the kitchen, a blender was going at full speed. It was an incredibly ominous blender. I was sentenced to death by decapitation for an unspecified crime. It didn't faze me that much. I was being all macho and Braveheart and shit, right up until the point where they put my head on the block, and in that moment, it suddenly became real. There was this effing wave of absolute terror, by far the most scared I've ever been in my life. Then the blade came down, and there was nothing for a while. Next thing I remember, I was walking around this fictional town really carefully, trying to keep my head balanced on my stump. I barely ever remember my dreams, but this one was vivid as F. Still creeps me out when I think about it. Had a dream where I was carrying around a large green gem. Every time I came to a choice, I'd look through the gem and it'd show me many options and outcomes. I'd pick which outcome I'd use. Slowly, my choices became more and more morbid. At one point, I was at a crosswalk and looked through the gem and saw myself hit by a car, or slip and break my neck. I decided to try and run away from it, and every choice from then on was death or painful death. Eventually, I ended up in a gray-pink area that I slowly realized was just every possibility of anything that could kill me, blurry and faded. I eventually found a gun and tried to shoot myself just to end the madness, but every time I pulled the trigger, I'd see my corpse fall in front of me, but I'd still be okay. After the third attempt, I freaked out over the 3 dead me's at my feet and gave up. After a while, I remember just sitting down in a chair and slowly fading into the background of all possibilities. I mean, that dream is equal parts creepy, disturbing, and kind of cool. Reminds me of a Choose Your Own Adventure book, so I should probably write that out. I used to have this dream or nightmare all the time where I'd be in like this complete white emptiness, like you always see in cartoons or TV shows when they like go to another dimension or something, with my dad, who's always been a really great guy, never ever threatening or anything, etc. Anyway, we'd just be standing there, and all of a sudden he'd get this look of horror on his face and point behind me, and let out this terrifying scream, and I'd turn around expecting something horrible, but there was nothing. Then he'd start laughing and give me a hug and tell me he was sorry, and everything's fine, etc. Then again, in like 5 minutes, he'd do the exact same thing, and I'd have the exact same gut-wrenching feeling, as if something horrible was going to happen, but I'd turn around and there'd be nothing there. I'm 19 now, and haven't had this dream in years, but I'll always remember it. TL, DR. In my dreams, my dad's an evil see you next Tuesday who scares the shit out of me every 5 minutes. The dream itself wasn't scary, but I've since grown scared of the feeling it produced. Let me explain. I remember being entangled in what seemed like millions of smooth, shiny wires, completely trapped. I remember the panic of being trapped set in, very remnant of claustrophobia. Then it hit me. I felt like every thought I was having was being screamed at me, but inside my own head, as if someone had turned the volume of my thoughts up full blast. It was one of the most unsettling, worst feelings I've ever had. It really is hard to explain. The thing is that once I woke up, whatever this was persisted for a while. I can best explain it through an analogy. It was as if normally my thoughts are just a guy, talking calmly and quietly, but in the dream, and shortly after, it felt like this guy was screaming at me. I don't mean to say that there's a man inside my head who tells me my thoughts or anything. That's goofy. This is just my best way of explaining. It has since happened a couple of times without the dream causing it, and I've yet to find out what it is or why it happens. All I know is that dream has stuck with me for over 10 years because of the unexplainable, terrifying, awful feeling that came with it. It was actually a 2-parter, 3 if you count the dream within a dream, when I was 12. It wasn't even scary as a dream, more because of the implication. Night 1. It started out normal enough. I was walking through the desert, and out of nowhere my mother shows up, desperate to tell me something. I listen, and she begs me to wake up. This is a dream. Please open your eyes and wake up. So I did. I was confused when I actually woke up and went back to sleep. Don't remember other dreams that night. Night 2, same premise. I was walking through the desert, but no mother to be seen. I then remember what she told me. If in a dream desert, wake up. Please wake up. I open my eyes and wake up in a medieval prison guarded by some sort of monsters. Naturally, I'm scared, but the people in that prison were terrified, telling me this wasn't supposed to happen, and that I should please go back to sleep and wake up in my room. It took a while for me to get to sleep, being in a prison and all, and the longer it took, the more terrified they became. Eventually, I went to sleep and woke up in my room, but I still wonder if that dream was trying to tell me something. TL, DR. Dreamt I was walking through a desert, tried to wake up, woke up imprisoned in a different dream, still knowing I was dreaming. When I was sick with the flu, I had a high fever and kept having dreams of clowns sitting in the dark in my living room. There was about 4 of them all sitting on our sofa, and they would just laugh menacingly at me over and over. No matter what I would do to wake up from this dream and go back to sleep to dream of them again. It didn't help that my mother collected little clown figurines. I was 4. I was being chased through my elementary school campus by a knife-wielding troll, the kind that had the colorful hair and the jewel in their belly button. He was 6 feet tall and had the knife to my mother's neck. He laughed menacingly, and it echoed down the hall at me and then slit her throat. He held her head, and by the hair, her decapitated body twitching on the ground. He dropped her head and started toward me. I turned around and ran as fast as I could. I felt a hand grasp my ankle, and I woke up. That was nearly 20 years ago. I still think about it more times than I'd like to admit. After this nightmare, I couldn't sleep for a week. When Inception came out, my friends and I joked that Hollywood stole my dream and made it into a movie. It is night, and I'm running through the canyon behind my house. There's a black vegetation looming around me on either side of the path, which faintly reflects the whiteness of the moonlight. The stark contrast of the light and dark emphasizes the impossible straightness of the path. I'm running and running when suddenly I'm stopped in my tracks by her. Now everything is dim except for her. She's glowing, mysteriously white, beautiful and terrifying. She smiles. I'm running away and running away until I wake up in a cold sweat. It was just a dream. It is still dark, but I decide to roll over and get out of bed. I scream. She's there, standing above my bed, smiling. I dash out of my room, down the stairs, out the garage, feet pummeling asphalt as I run down the road away. But then, she's there in front of me again, smiling. Scared out of my wits, I stop and I wake up in a cold sweat. It was just a dream. It is dark, but I decide to roll over and get out of bed. I scream. She's there again, standing above my bed, smiling. I dash out of my room, down the stairs, out the garage, feet pummeling asphalt as I run down the road. But then she's there in front of me, again, smiling. Scared out of my wits, I stop. She glides away and begins to smile and talk to a group of my friends on the side of the road. I try to scream at them, and I wake up in a cold sweat. It was just a dream. It's dark, but I decide to roll over and get out of bed. I scream. She's there again, standing above my bed, smiling. I dash out of my room, down the stairs, out the garage, feet pummeling asphalt as I run down the road away. But then she's there standing with my friends, smiling and talking. I try to warn them, but she turns to smile at me, and I wake up in a cold sweat. It was just a dream, a long, disturbing dream, but just a dream. It is dark, but I decide to grab my laptop and talk to a friend about this. I almost expect her to be there, but she's not. I start up my laptop and then begin chatting with a friend, asking if he knows anything about this sort of creature. He says he has these dreams too, but it is a different person, a smiling boy that befriends his friends. Oh no, is this real? She and he are both some sort of real vampire? What the hell do I do? Then I remember the girl is real and I know her. Maybe she can help. I start chatting with her and relax. They were just disturbing dreams, and I'm probably just overly stressed from school. She comforts me and asks me if I can pinpoint the cause of these dreams. I ponder this for a bit and remember that this seems to have all began when my mother hung up a mosaic of a house above my bed. I speculate that it might have inspired these dreams. I snap a photograph of it and send it to her, asking her what she thought of it. She does not respond for a while, but after a long pause she asks, "Why do you have a mosaic of my house?" My head spins, mouth agape. My head whips back to the mosaic. I whimper. There's a small figure in the doorway of my house. It was not there before. Chilled to the bone, I scrambled out of my room and down the hallway, only to be confronted by the same damned mosaic. I scream silently when I notice that the figure is slightly larger and closer. I keep running, but my house is now a maze. In every corner, the mosaic appears. Every time I nearly run into the mosaic, the figure is nearer, more threatening. I am at wit's end, on the brink of losing my sanity out of sheer terror. I halt dead in my tracks in front of another wall and now the figure is life-size and looming in the mosaic. The figure moves, it leaps out, and I wake up screaming and crying. A little repetitive and story-like, but if that was a real dream, it's pretty wild. So thanks for sharing. Brevity. Hanging out with my family in the living room. My brother, who has a very short buzz cut, leaves the room saying that he's going to go shave his head with the belt sander in the garage. It made sense in the dream. A few seconds later, a fine red mist starts spraying from the ventilation duct in the ceiling, followed shortly by blood dripping from the vent and soaking through the ceiling in a line coming from the direction of the garage. My parents and I rush over to the garage and throw open the door, just in time to see my brother, whose head had gotten caught in the belt sander and most of his face sanded off, get thrown forcefully sideways by the force of the sander into the bandsaw, which quickly decapitated him and also cut off his hand. His body kept standing stiffly twitching as his neck and arm stump spurted blood and sanded face bits into the dust collection system, which had been disturbing the gore into the rest of the house's ventilation system. At which point I woke up in a cold sweat and had to resist the urge to call my brother at 3 a.m. to make sure he was okay. I can still remember the smell of blood as it started misting through the vent, and that sickening, stomach-sinking feeling as you know something has gone horribly wrong and you're already too late. I had the weirdest dream a few months ago. I was in this living room with a bunch of people, hipsterish I guess, with these old couches and rugs and an old beat-up coffee table. Pretty normal room, except it was an effing morgue. One whole wall was covered in those cabinet things they put dead people in. You know, the metal ones? Except they weren't metal. They were glass or plastic or something. You could see through. The rest of the walls were bare concrete. These hipsters and I were just having a normal conversation. There were coffee cups on the table, and one of them was playing with a Rubik's Cube. At random moments in the conversation, some of the drawers in the wall would fly open, and these dead people with majorly effed up bloody faces would join the conversation. Then the guys with the Rubik's Cube was trying to fit the cube into one of the coffee cups, with a smile on his face that faded as he noticed the cube wouldn't fit. Similar to a 2-year-old playing with those boxes with shapes and pegs, he threw the Rubik's Cube and it bounced on the table and nailed me in the face. All of them started throwing ceramic coffee cups at me, and once those were all gone, they forced me to pull out all of my hair in small handfuls. All of the drawers in the wall rushed open once I was done, and the dead people started eating my hair. It might not sound that creepy, but I woke up screaming and terrified. I've had nightmares that stuck with me when I woke because of their vagueness and the fact that the gray area I can't remember is probably so dark I couldn't trick my brain to conjuring it up while I was conscious. But the shit that really haunts me is when reality is non-existent and I'm trapped in pure mental seizure. Only way I could even attempt to describe it is if time flowed like scratched records. I have a recurring dream where I claw into my chest with my fingernails until I can rip my heart out. Once I have my heart in my hands, I eat it and feel it still pulsing as it slides down my throat. Then I cradle the hole in my chest until I wake up. The entire dream I'm always crying and screaming, but filled with the most savage desire to eat my heart. So strange. And I always wake up with scratches on my chest. It gives me the shivers just thinking about it.